please call the roll.
Alderman Ames. Here. Alderman Catalano.
Here.
Alderman Curiel.
Here.
Alderman Jacob.
Here.
Alderman Messina.
Here.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Here.
Alderman Sosmarsky. Alderman Woods.
Here. Call a quorum. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for April 8th, 2021.
Second.
Any questions, corrections, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next, report and recommendation. Approval of a zoning variation to allow a 6-foot-high fence in the front yard, 394 Preserve Lane, case number CDC-2021-04. Mr. Cage?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a case that went to CDC on May 17th. And just to kind of orientate everybody, this is not the clearest, but obviously Preserve Lane, I believe Central's kind of over here to the west. The property we're talking about is 394, outlined right here. And I'd probably just draw your attention to the property owner's residences down here on Deer Path. And obviously you can see pretty substantial conservation easement and regulatory wetlands. I know in the packet there's some pictures that will reflect some flooding concerns and certainly some more than flooding concerns, flooding issues.
That conservation easement is owned by that resident as well, right?
That is correct, yes. So, moving along, subject property, picture taken from Preserve Lane, obviously the public hearing sign, the existing residence to the west. Kind of a better perspective from the end of Preserve. Obviously, it's a cul-de-sac. You have a couple of other new houses on this side of the road, a new house over here, and this is the subject property that we're discussing. This is the plan of survey, which really indicates kind of the areas that we're talking about. Obviously, the lots in Preserve were subdivided a number of years ago. This is the property line dividing parcel 8, which is 394 Preserve, from the conservation easement owned by the property owner on Deer Path to the south. And this just is in here really just to give you an idea of what the code allows. A 6-foot privacy fence, which people typically have in their side and rear yard, would be allowed kind of in this area. And then once you get to beyond the front facade of the house, you're allowed a 4-foot open picket style fence. And so that's what the code allows. What the applicant is requesting, and I do have a recent update from today on this. So this has kind of been an application where the applicant has taken into account some of the neighbors' comments, and I'll update you in just a second. But originally, the applicant wanted to place a 6-foot fence up to Preserve, hence the need for the variance, because obviously, as you just recall, this area here is technically the front yard, which the code only allows a 4-foot picket style fence. And what the applicant talked to Gosha, the planner at the city today, is they would like this. Obviously, this area would not be fenced because obviously the property owner on Deer Path owns this property, the conservation easement that Alderman Messina just mentioned. And so what they're talking about now is a 6-foot solid wooden fence up to here. And then one of the conditions from the CDC was a wrought iron style fence. And the property owner, the applicant, has indicated that they'd be willing to do a wrought iron style fence 6 feet, which hence the need for the variance kind of in this area, which leaves this somewhat more open, obviously a better look, but also achieves what the applicant wants, which is the wooden style 6-foot fence here. And I believe the neighboring property owner likes that plan because they have issues with animals coming through into their yard, hence their desire for a 6-foot wooden fence. So the CDC recommended approval, 5-1. Obviously, it's designated, the property is designated as single-family residential on the future land use plan, and they felt that it achieved goal 4 and objective 2, manage development to create a balanced mix of land uses, promoting economic vitality and a sustainable quality of life. And the CDC found that it was consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with the UDO, and then that's that condition that I just mentioned, that the applicant is willing to do from what would be the front facade of of the normal house location to the front of the lot would be a wrought iron style. And with that, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
Alderman
Answer
Messina, go ahead. You
Okay.
got it.
Yeah, no, I've spent a lot of time on that property, and you've honed in well, and I think the late breaking is exactly that. So, which, not my opinion, right? None of us are stylists, but the guy next door, does insist on a wooden fence. He was in the audience and didn't speak up because of the road scenario, right? Because this guy's lot is massive; it backs up to everybody, that whole block behind him. He's going to do that. I think the initial request was, I want wood everywhere, right? And even the neighbor was great with that. He scaled it back. Well, CDC approved, no, we want wrought iron, right? Which he wasn't thrilled with because the cost, but was going to do. And now it's the compromise of wood up to the, like you said, the front of the neighbor's house, and then wrought iron the rest, 25 foot around, right? I think you said that, but essentially 25 foot from the face of the neighbor's house. But that'll be 6 foot is what we would be voting on, not 4 foot, which is allowed. So that's really the only thing we're voting on.
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor, please.
So, that's why, not two things, so I want to be clear on the fence here. So, the sides can be 6 feet, couple questions, right?
Yes,
The green can be 6 feet.
the green can be 6 feet,
So,
correct.
anybody, if they wanted to put a fence going past that 25 foot, would have to do some kind of picket fence, otherwise, that's why the variance.
Correct.
Okay, so, we had a variance in front of us, across the street on Center Street. Guy wanted to put a fence, and we basically said no, because that would ruin what was the wording? The
Aesthetics.
aesthetics of the street. You have house, fence, house. The aesthetics is not consistent with the neighborhood. So why would we put a fence over here when it's not consistent with the rest of the neighbors? Same thing, especially 6 feet.
Mr. Cage.
Yes, I recall the application on Center Street. Not to be argumentative, that there's a couple of differences that I know that applicant wanted. They proposed, I should say, a 6-foot solid fence at the setback on Center Street. So the difference being that the fence they're proposing is a solid fence. Breaking news today that the hybrid wrought iron in the front is proposed by this applicant. And then the other part is that the applicant on Center, it was a lot consolidation, and then they had some other improvements. So I think fence issues being similar, but there was, I would say this is an application for a fence variance. That application had a number of other things going with it, and there are another number of other complications with that particular application.
Sure, go ahead.
So if the guy on Center Street wouldn't have came in for joining the two properties, making them one, right? That's what you said.
Consolidation, yeah.
So if he didn't consolidate, we would let him put up a fence past the 25 foot all the way, is that? And then it would be open, then he would just put a pool at the back end of that lot. And it,
This was different. That's weird.
that's,
Mr. Cage.
Thank you. I guess what I'm saying, Mayor, is that the application on Center Street was more complicated because the applicant was asking for more items. They were creating, so that they have a house, I believe, on Timber.
Right.
And they were creating a through lot all the way through to Center, which is different, and the one that we're talking about tonight on Preserve is, you know, you've got a lot on Preserve. I guess what I'm saying is that they're not exactly the same. There's some similar concepts in terms of the fence,
The consistency.
but there were other issues that I recall on the Center Street application.
I drove by there, so you got a brand new house that went up right next to this lot. And the owner made the White House, it's
Yes.
beautiful. And now you wanna put a fence all the way pretty much to the street. Everybody else has a sidewalk as they put up homes. This person wants to come right to the street. He wouldn't be allowed to do that anyways, right? How far off the street does he have to be? With the 4-foot fence?
Director
The
Cage?
picket fence.
Thank you. So what we recommend with a fence, it's 6 inches off the property line, so it would be,
Off the sidewalk.
exactly, thank you.
Alderman Catalano?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Where, if you go back to that map,
Yeah,
where you, yeah. Go back to the, shows the fence line.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The
Yeah, sure.
survey, the plat.
Right,
Yeah.
so where is the house gonna be on that lot?
That's what I want to show.
No house.
No house. Is there gonna be a house built there?
No.
Okay.
That's what makes it a one-off. So, to help Alderman Catalano, if you were to construct a house, because I think that's part of his question, the house would not be able to exceed that dashed line where it says 25-foot setback?
Exactly, the house, this is the building envelope. The house has to be within this area to maintain side and the rear and the front yard setbacks.
And if there was a house on the property
Mhm.
and they were requesting the fence, they would be allowed to put up a 6-foot fence from the front corner of the house all the way to the back, across the back up
Mhm.
to the front corner of the house.
Correct.
Okay.
Beyond that, what would they be able to put up and how far could they go?
Beyond that, it would be this area right here in front of the house, and it would be a 4-foot
4-foot.
open picket style fence.
All the way up to the sidewalk, that's allowed?
6 inches
Okay.
off.
Within
Six
6
inches,
inches, yes.
All right, Alderman Jacob?
Yeah, a couple things. One thing that the house or the property that the mayor is talking about, those people were putting in lights, tennis courts, pool. They're basically making it a sports complex, which nothing like this. This person basically owns from 83 to Central, the whole forest preserve behind their home,
Sorry.
and they're buying as that whole property is owned by that property owner. They want to, with the nature, they want to preserve that lot and keep that a wooded lot and expand their property. So it's nothing similar to what the mayor is saying.
Alderman Messina?
Yeah, I don't know, I was hoping that this video would have been shown, but I know Gosha has seen it. Would I be allowed to just kind of show people the video? Those in the third ward would appreciate. Is there a way to, I don't know, because it's not an iPad, but essentially,
Yeah, not quickly.
What are you trying to?
so essentially, this is, to your point, Alderman Jacob, this is 1,000,000% different than that property, in that he owns this property here, this conservation easement, and this.
You have to stay by the microphone, Randy.
Okay. Yeah, I'm loud.
No, but
Okay. Well, anyways, so the regulatory wetland, the conservation easement, behind them is what they've kept. And even with that, right, this is his backyard when it rains, as he terms it, Lake Lawler. So they bought that property, in essence, to really help with their flooding, because they got 6 feet of water in their basement. So it's beyond just the regulatory wetland conservation, it's this, trying to stop the flooding. I mean, and so, I mean, you have a neighbor that's existing, they've compromised, I mean, they're gonna put the wrought iron fence beyond that. I'd like to put the motion up, if there's no motion, I would like to put the motion up to,
Can't put a motion.
why can't I?
You spoke at the CDC. I told you.
As a resident, I didn't speak as an elected. And according to the city attorney, he said that we could speak,
That's-
because they were talking about aesthetics.
Somebody else should make the
I'll
motion.
make the motion to approve the zoning variance.
I'll second it.
So, I'll make a few comments then. So, I think the similarity that was trying to be drawn, obviously there are two different pieces of property, one a conservation area versus another property, but the theme is consistent, and that's to not drastically affect the aesthetics of the neighborhood and consistency of the neighborhood. If you can imagine then, if you could do that, then I'll go on to each side of somebody's house and just fence it out and call it my own. Part of the problem with, or part of the issue with the one across the street was putting the fence on. We required them to consolidate the lots. Consolidating the lots then made them go to the other thing that we were gonna put up a sport court. So that was a progression of things. I get that it's a different use, and this guy wants to save it for pristine property to stop flooding. Well, there's no building there now, so it's not like he's gonna tear down a building and reduce flooding. So the fact that that fence, I don't mind that the fence goes up to where the property line was to solve the problem. Right, he can maintain the property, but to go beyond the face of the building,
What's gonna be?
I think drastically affects the aesthetics of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And besides the fence, I would ask, since he's not gonna build a house, and never intends to build a house, correct? I would ask that he built the sidewalk just as if he were to build a house. Otherwise, the sidewalk would never be completed. Alderman Messina.
I can see where you're coming from, but he's got letters that he submitted to Gosha, and he couldn't be there today because he was traveling. With approval from the neighbor at 392, whatever, right next door to the white one, and across the street. I mean, the due diligence that this, man and wife have done to go to the neighbors. And like, as I said, as a resident, when I spoke at the CDC, I said, we can't judge on aesthetics. You might like a wooden fence, I might like a wrought iron fence. Fine. This gentleman stood up and said, I'll do whatever it takes. I just need to make my wife happy so that we can conserve this land and we don't flood, so that lake doesn't happen again. And so I thought that this, my opinion, and this is beyond what I knew, late breaking news, that they were going to agree to do the wrought iron, even though the neighbor to the left still wants that wood fence, because they want critters. They don't want the critters getting in. He's already got a wooden fence next door. So for us to make an opinion based on what we feel the 3 remaining lots may or may not want, I think that's beyond our scope. I mean, he's got emails that he sent to Gosha from the existing owners next door and across the street that agree with the approach. So, I mean, that is why I agree with the motioner and the seconder.
Right. Well, I'll speak to the points that you brought up. One, I think there's 8 empty lots, so we have to speak for the 8 empty lots.
There's
And
not
then
even,
even the other ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, if I count all of them that you can build on. Right? And if it was a matter of 2 guys agreeing on how they're gonna change the zoning code, well, then we'd be in the wild, wild west. I get the fact
That's
that
3.
guy talked to him, or both of them, the adjoining ones, and they agreed on something.
so how do you know the next person
issue,
to move?
the issue
the next
that you're
person.
saying exists.
So if you move in, you're going to say, I
No,
like the
if
wrought
you-
iron,
if
but
you
if
let
I
me-
move in, I'm
if
going to
you
say
let
I'm
me
fine with it.
finish.
It doesn't make sense. We we
Alderman
don't know what the
Messina.
next person, you can't
Alderman
foreshadow,
Messina.
you're foreshadowing. That is
Alderman
beyond our
Messina,
scope.
If you'd let me finish, I let you talk.
Okay.
The problem is flooding, right? That's what you said?
If a house goes up, you don't think that that's going to cause
No,
an issue?
he owns the property. No house is gonna go up.
He's going to sell it if he can't.
Second, he
do it.
puts the fence up. If he keeps it to the front of the house, it solves his problem. I don't know why he has to go out to the sidewalk. That doesn't do anything to protect it anymore.
And
Right, that's the issue is flooding. He already owns it, so there is no flooding. Nobody can build there. He wants a fence to keep animals out or something, all right, we'll give him the fence, but why do you have to go all the way out to the?
We won't let me comment.
The
Can I
sidewalk.
comment, because this was already,
Alderman Messina, go ahead.
because the neighbors said, we definitely don't want what's allowed in code, which is a 4-foot picket fence. Help, Mr. Lawler, help. That's why. They don't want what our code allows, and maybe that's a code change, it's on us. But if we did, he's gonna put a 4-foot picket fence the rest of the way. And then you're really not gonna sell those lots. If you want. He's gonna
Mayor,
pay
please.
for one.
You wanted
He
to-
is- if he goes back-
so, my worry is if we do something like this, we're just gonna set a precedent and open the door to other things similar. I can name probably 3 other spots in town that this could happen at, and we're not gonna set a precedent. I'm sure if we would've negotiated with the guy with the pool, he might have done something different and moved the pool back, might have put the picket fence in the front, and put the pool closer to the back of his house or something, but he didn't get that chance either, because that's consistency, right? If we're consistent, it's the same for everybody, you know, variations. So, I had just heard, he wants to conserve the land, so if he puts his 6-foot fence down the side, then he puts his 4-foot fence that's allowed, didn't even need a variance, and the land is conserved. So I don't understand why we had to go for this variance when he could simply put his 4-foot fence and 6-foot fence on the side, and we're done.
Yeah.
Because otherwise then we're gonna have all kinds of people coming up with all kinds of wild things. I don't wanna set a precedent.
Alderman Jacob?
Yeah, again, this is a very unique property. I don't know, the mayor has all these other properties he could come up with. There are no houses behind them, there never will be. They made that the people that own the property made that you will never, ever be able to build on their land. They made that a conservation easement for the life of forever. That's never gonna change. The property over here, you got back-to-back houses. I don't know where there's empty lots and where somebody owns a whole block of lots that is a conservation easement. So, you know,
The rest of the 2 streets, Janice Lane and Preserve Court, all the empty lots, the ones you don't see a house on are empty lots, buildable lots.
correct.
You could build 11 more houses there. That drastically affects the aesthetics of the house. I have no problem with the fence going up to the house line.
But you're putting a picket, so you're gonna have a 6-foot wood fence, and then you're gonna have a 6-foot wood picket fence. It's gonna look ridiculous. And the residents, and then,
You just told me that nobody up here can judge the aesthetics, and now you're judging.
I didn't say that.
I did.
Okay, I retract. Your counterpart.
I mean,
Alderman Messina.
we're fighting aesthetics, right? So you have what we feel, but this is, and this is fine because this is a completely different scenario than the house across the street. This is a house that backs into what's considered a tucked away cul-de-sac. You don't get to that cul-de-sac unless you go down Wood Lane, all the way down the street to the left. It is next to impossible to even find this new subdivision. So to me, it makes no sense. And then you have, hey, if I build it the way they want me to, so this individual has gone and said, I'm just warning you, this is what code allows. 6-foot, 4-foot picket. And the neighbors have said, please no. He compromised and he goes, okay, well, maybe we'll do a 6-foot fence. Okay, CDC told him, wrought iron. All right, whatever you guys want. I'll do whatever you want. The neighbor comes again and says, and all these are in emails from these neighbors that said, we want to keep the rodents out. I need that wood fence. I already have, the neighbor to the left of him already has a wooden fence already up there. He's going to finish it with a wooden fence. He goes, you know how ridiculous, after that meeting outside, said, you know how ridiculous it's going to look when there is a wooden fence that so you're going to force him to put a wrought iron fence up or aluminum, and then I still have to put up my wood fence. That is what that neighbor said. We have an email from that neighbor, existing, not potential, that said that. So he's gonna still have to so you're still gonna put a financial strain on the neighbor. He's still gonna have to put a wood fence there, even if Mr. Lawler were to put wrought iron everywhere. I mean, so, again, you're putting on this financial strain, and I understand aesthetics, that's why they agreed this morning to just say, all right, you want wrought iron for the aesthetics, we'll put the wrought iron in the front. This way the neighbor's happy, he doesn't have to put a wooden fence is going up whether he doesn't, if we do nothing tonight, a wood fence is going up at that neighbor's house, no matter what. So we have to look at what's there today. I agree with you, I understand, but this is not a precedence because this is a completely different lot. This is a completely different lot in a different area. If you were to give it a bigger area, you would see that it is completely different. This isn't a regular side street. For contact, I mean, this is off of Central, off of Wood Lane. You can't find this even, I can't imagine how they get packages. It's next to impossible to find. Anyways, there's a motion on the floor in a second, so I'm gonna hush.
Alderman Jacob.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, we talk about precedents, so then we should just do away with variations totally, because many times we have said yes to somebody and no to the person that asked for the exact same thing. So then we should just say, you know what, the city of Wooddale will not allow variance ever again. Because I could name a bunch, if I do my research, there's a bunch of things that this city council has approved, mayor included, when he was an alderman and as mayor, where the precedence is totally different now. They approved one, now they oppose that. I'll give you an example. On Potter Street in our ward, the city council approved somebody dumping water into the city's retention pond. That was never allowed, but the city council at that time allowed it, allowed the developer to do it. And I could tell you right now, this city council would never allow that again because that was a big mistake.
Well, thank you for pointing out that mistake, and we'll never make it again, which is why we're talking about this. And doing it correctly, you learn from those mistakes. The issue with the neighbor likes the fence, he wants a wood fence, that really has nothing to do with this guy getting in a variance to extend the fence out to the sidewalk and do something different. I mean, he can put up a fence if he wants to. I don't get, the concern is flooding, that's what you told me, and putting up the fence actually hinders flooding, it doesn't help flooding. But I get that he wants to enclose it because I think somebody cut trees or something, I heard.
They did.
And enter it. So I could see the guy wanting to fence it off and contain it into his wetland. The whole regulatory wetland, I think that is mainly a chain link fence, might be a black vinyl chain link fence, but chain link fence nonetheless. Again, to put this out, there's literally, the mayor said a dozen, there's hundreds of places that the guys that would be coming in here to put that fence up if we allow this to go forward. Going past the front of the house, I just can't get there. Alderman Messina.
Yeah, and you're entitled to your prerogative, and that's why there's 8 of us. I would ask if there was a better aerial that we could zoom out. I think you would appreciate how different there is. I would challenge you to find 5 houses that have this scenario, that a wetland, protected wetland, backs up
That
to...
has nothing to do with extending the front of the house. It doesn't.
But it
That
does.
does not,
No,
unrelated.
But how is unrelated going to a back end where you have consensus from the other neighbors? I mean, so to me, he could have gone and put up that 4-foot picket fence that extends beyond the 25 foot of that face of that house, and you'd have some people in here probably even more upset because that would ruin the aesthetics, right? To each their own. We don't own those houses. We don't own those future lots. The existing folks that are there have spoken in support of this, and they've sent emails to staff with that support. Now, that's the facts. We can hypothesize all day, but those are the facts. We don't live there, we don't own the lots, but those that are there have expressed what they wanted, and he's compromising. He is putting that wrought iron fence as a compromise, even though it's gonna cost them more money to have that. And it's not a permanent structure, and I'll stop.
Mayor, please.
Just to address Alderman Jacob, so I could tell you, I have been consistent. And what previous councils did before we got here, and to be honest with you, this subdivision was done before even I was on this council, was approved. I was not on this council when it went to, at one point, this Preserve Lane. Preserve Lane and Janice Lane.
Well, Potter you were.
No, that was actually not. So, consistency. If you're going to allow something here, whether it's wood or wrought iron, the code allows for certain things. And we're worried about flooding, and a 6-foot, whether it's a 6-foot wrought iron fence or 4-foot wrought iron fence, if he puts the fence up around the property, he doesn't have to worry about it. Nobody's going to build. He's not going to build. Flooding's not, he doesn't even have to put a fence in the back because he could leave it open. Consistency for the neighborhood. It's plain and simple. This should not go through.
That and one last, and I'll let you
Yeah,
repeat, but the other thing here is I, besides getting past the front of the house and the aesthetic part, but I can't get past that there's actually no shown hardship. What's the hardship? I wanna stop flooding, that fence isn't gonna stop flooding. I wanna stop critters, the fence isn't gonna stop the critters. I mean, the biggest thing he did was buying the property and freezing it so nobody could build there. That, in fact, was a positive move. So I don't see where he's hurt or injured that we have to create the variance, and that's one of the key things that we have to prove up.
We have to prove
We
a
keep-
grievance? No. A
Yes,
hardship?
a hardship
Yes, it's part of the,
for
As
variances.
one of the facts, sorry.
as one of the facts.
Yes, sir.
So, with that, Alderman Messina.
I would
I'll
just,
let you-
so he doesn't satisfy that by then saying, I will compromise and I will pay a lot more money for wrought iron so that the aesthetics of the front, which the neighbors would much rather have than the code allows, which is a 4-foot wooden picket fence. So if he puts up a 4-foot picket fence, which is what we allow, and we always say, some of these codes were created way before we were here, doesn't make sense. If he puts that up, those existing residents, not the ones that are gonna be there in 2050, those existing residents are gonna be irate because they all preferred what's being proposed here, that compromise, and I think, Ed, you showed that picture. They're willing, there is gonna be a hardship, and this is part of the problem. Just because he owns this lot doesn't mean he's got money to burn. It is a hardship. He's already gonna have a hardship because he's gotta pay for wrought iron for the front of it, and it's not cheap, 25 foot of it. Yet, he's doing that to compromise and work with the neighbors. Both him and his wife have talked to those existing neighbors. To me, I don't know why we're looking at a broader thing. We're really just looking at the front 25 foot, and I think he's gone above and beyond. He is gonna face a hardship because he's gotta go from wood to wrought iron, which is extremely expensive, especially in this market.
But that would be a self-created hardship. The hardship doesn't exist.
Well, he's trying
for
to
the
do that
variance.
to build a compromise with
And-
what
Alright.
what the committee
Right,
wants,
but
right?
final
We're
statement,
creating
though,
we're
throughout-
creating it. We're creating the
throughout
hardship.
almost every community in the area, the code's pretty consistent, zoning codes are pretty consistent. I think that the Director Cage could speak to that, they're pretty consistent
But they
on the
approved this.
fencing and,
The committee and the
setbacks.
staff approved both. I don't know.
Did the CDC approve this, Ed? First slide,
Alderman Sorrentino,
what I just said.
Director Cage.
Yeah, this, on May 17th of the public hearing, the CDC approved it 5-1.
Can we go for roll call?
And they approved a wrought iron fence.
Wrought iron fence.
Okay.
Could we roll call?
So to confirm, are we approving, is the motion to approve what the CDC approved? Because we can't change what they approved.
Yes, we can. We could amend what the CDC approved.
So the,
Director Cage.
thank you. The condition, the CDC recommended approval 5-1 of a wrought iron style fence,
What's the height?
6 feet. So then subsequently, with discussions with the neighbor, the applicant contacted Gosha today, and that was the talk of the hybrid version that we were mentioned earlier.
So the motion is to, Alderman Messina, if you want, since you made it, I think.
Sonny made the motion.
Sonny?
Motion is,
To the property line.
all right, well, according to what it says here, is the approval of the zoning variation to allow 6-foot high fence in the front yard at 394 Preserve Lane, and then it identifies it by a case number, and I'm sure in that case number talks about the wrought iron as well as the wood.
No, it only addresses the wrought iron, which is why I'm bringing this up, so that there's no misunderstanding of what the motion is, or what's gonna get passed when we vote
Well,
on it.
that's Mr. Cage. Is the wood mentioned in that CDC case?
Director Gage?
Thank you. So the application was submitted as a wooden fence. The discussion of the wrought iron came up at the CDC meeting, and that was the condition that was added to the recommendation of the CDC.
And approve.
And recommended approval 5-1, correct?
Well, then I think this motioner would like to amend the motion to include the original CDC number, which was the wooden fence, as well as the amended approval of the wrought iron fence as of today's date. So it would be all inclusive of the height at 6 feet with the wrought iron and additional wooden fence at 394 preserved length. That is my motion amendment.
Okay, so just,
Seconder.
so I can, well, first let me try to clarify what Alderman Sorrentino said.
Let's just ask you
So are-
to repeat it. You put on a whole new meaning to what I just said.
No, you're saying, because you specifically said 6 foot, so you're saying 6 foot all the way around the house?
To allow a 6-foot high fence in front yard. That's not all the way around the house. It says front yard. Is that what we're talking about here?
That's what you're talking about.
Well, that's what
Does
this
the
piece of
seconder,
paper says.
does the seconder agree with what the motioner?
Yeah, From what I understand, he's gonna do the wrought iron in front. He does not need any variance to do the wood on his property, except the variance is for the front, which he agreed to do the wrought iron. So yes, that would be my motion.
At 6 foot
At 6 foot, yeah,
into the front yard.
into the front yard, yes.
All right, just wanted to confirm. Because for the last hour, we've been talking 4 foot in the front.
That's what's in code,
Oh, okay.
It's what the variance
picket
is
fence code.
to allow 6.
Okay. Roll call?
Alderman Ames.
No.
Alderman Catalano.
No.
Alderman Curiel.
No.
Alderman Jacob.
Yes,
Alderman Messina.
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
No. That fails.
That burns and fails. We all jump in with Lawler.
Next items to be considered at future meetings, SBT, summer of 2021. Route 83 development, summer of 2021. Billboard, summer of 2021. Is there anything anybody else would like to add or address? There being none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
I'd like to call the Public Works Committee meeting to order. Please have the minute taker note the same people are present. Up first, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last Public Works Committee meeting dated May 13th.
second.
Any questions? Okay. Up first is a report of recommendations. All in favor, excuse me. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. So up first is an approval of an agreement between the City of Wooddale and Performance Pipelining for the fiscal year 2022 sewer rehabilitation program in an amount not to exceed $599,058.50. That would be my motion.
Second.
Any questions? Roll, yeah, because there is money involved. Roll call, please.
Alderman Ames.
Yes.
Alderman Catalano.
Yes.
Alderman Curiel.
Yes.
Alderman Jacob.
Yes.
Alderman Messina.
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
Yes.
Okay, and that passes. Next is an approval of an agreement between the City of Wooddale and Treaty Construction, Inc. for the fiscal year 2022 sidewalk and RTA stamped concrete replacement program in an amount not to exceed $85,305. That is my motion.
Second.
All right. Roll call. Any questions, concerns? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Ames.
Yes.
Alderman Catalano.
Yes.
Alderman Curiel.
Yes.
Alderman Jacob.
Yes.
Alderman Messina.
Yes,
Alderman Sorrentino.
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
Yes.
and that passes. Items to be considered at future meetings. One is water analysis, July 2021. Second, streetlight revised policy, July 2021. Third, sump pump program, July 2021. And patching program, August 2021. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All right, is there a second? No,
Second.
Sorry about that, okay.
All in
Roll-
favor?
yep. Meeting adjourned? or-
All in favor?
All in favor.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
And that passes. Meeting adjourned.
Hallelujah.
I'd like to call the order of the Finance and Administration Committee. Minute taker, please take note that the same council members are present. And I would like to make a motion for the minutes for April 22nd, 2021, Finance and Administration Committee meetings.
Second those
Any
minutes.
corrections to those meetings? If there are none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is report and recommendation. And I guess we got a presentation for approval of, make a motion for the Public Works Building and TIF project funding. That is my motion?
Wait, you making a motion?
Yep.
Second.
Wait,
And
there's
then-
two options. So.
Okay, well, let's listen to the,
The motion was
Go
to
ahead.
hear both options, and I seconded it.
Nice cover.
go ahead, Director
My partner
Wilson.
got it covered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the presentation on the screen will be a little sparse, because as the Mayor kind of pointed out, there's two options. I mean, technically, there's three. We've talked about the Public Works Building a couple times, committee meetings recently, and you've heard me say both times that if in the CIP, it was designed to be a 4 to 5 year build-out. However, based upon the recent conversations at the committee meetings with Williams Architects and Quinn, the intention of the council was to get that done sooner than 5 years. That being said, that would, require some bonding. The Public Works Building, the new one is in the TIF, so that does qualify. Additionally, there is some land acquisition that the city is looking to do within the TIF, so that would also qualify. One of the other projects in the memo mentioned is a new roadway and potential signalization, new light, new stoplight in the area east of the current TIF, east of Edgewood. That's a little bit of a different scenario, and that's where the options really come into play.
You
Go ahead.
can introduce this.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, what? Yeah.
Mr. Wilson, would you introduce the young gentleman?
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, I was going to get to him, but yeah, we can.
You're kind of leaving him hanging. so-
Okay, I was going to get to him with the options, but okay. To my left, we have Mr. Anthony Maselli from Spear Financial. They're our financial advisors on all things bonds and debt, things of that nature. In years past, when we first started this, when we did the treatment plant project, you may remember Mr. Kevin McKenna was our agent from Spear. He's, I guess, good for Kevin. He's kind of cycling out of the process, and so Mr. Maselli's been our representative from Spear for probably the last 5 years, 6 years, probably? Yeah, 5 or 6 years. 5 or 6 years, so. Yeah, so I've traded, I don't know, probably tens, hundreds of emails with him over the past few years. And so the bonds we just did for the first phase of the stormwater project, he's the one that, got us, over the goal line on that one. So he's here tonight to kind of fill in some of the potential gaps that I have too, so.
Do you have a PowerPoint? No.
All right, so the Public Works Building and the land acquisition that has previously been discussed, those are both within the existing TIF, and so there's no issue with bonding for those, should the city desire to get those projects done in a more expedited manner than the 5 to 6 years it would take to do them if we were to look to pay cash. Where the bonding gets a little more complicated is in the area outside of the existing TIF. So from Edgewood, the eastern boundary lines of Edgewood, the properties in incorporated Wooddale, east to 83, should the city look to pursue some economic development within that region. So as you can see in the memo, it says option 1, Public Works and TIF, property acquisition TIF, that works. And then 2 and 3, new roads and signalization, it's split between TIF and motor fuel tax. So since those areas are not in a TIF district, we're not able to utilize 100% TIF funding for those projects. Our attorneys at Ice Miller have opined in generalities that we could probably do a 75-25 split between TIF funding and non-TIF funding. The reason for that is that the roadway and signalization would have a positive impact on the TIF and would meet the but-for argument that development, certain development within the TIF district that would be benefited from the road would not happen but for the road. So that's why they've opined that we could use partial funding for that. The 25% match would have to come from another funding source of the cities. Currently, eligible pots of money would be the non-home rule sales tax. However, that's largely spoken for the Ward 2 and 3 stormwater project that's going on. We did the first bond issue last year. We're working on the IEPA loan for the second phase of that currently. Another one could possibly be the Road and Bridge Fund. However, that one's a little tight with the budget and how we're going to be utilizing that money over the next few years. The general fund would be an option. However, based upon the obligations of the general fund, that's not something that we would really even look at, to be honest, unless we absolutely had to. And then the last pot would be the motor fuel tax. Currently, the expenses out of there, some stoplights, some street lights, and then salt. So there is capacity within the motor fuel tax fund to do some of this bonding. We also have been receiving money from the state of Illinois through the Build Illinois. That money has been earmarked for the Elizabeth Park Road Bridge project that is currently being designed and worked on. So really we're talking about just the annual capacity in the MFT fund based upon the revenues that are generated between the standard motor fuel tax and then the additional money that went in, was it a year and a half ago, the additional transportation money, the additional fuel tax that went in.
Go ahead.
Do you have a lot more to go, or? Okay, go ahead. Let him finish.
Okay. Yeah.
I can wait.
So the motor fuel tax, based upon availability of funding in the budget, as well as the fact that a road and a signal would and are qualifying expenses for a motor fuel tax, that's what led us to present that here in option 1. A more straightforward funding option would be option 2, where the Public Works building and the property acquisition would come out of the existing TIF. And then the remaining expenses would come out of, you'll see it says new TIF. So the concept would be that what's currently the areas east of Edgewood over to 83, which may or may not be incorporated, they would have to be incorporated into the city for the city to do a TIF, because obviously we can't TIF property that's not ours. So we would need to do a TIF investigation with SB Friedman to see if it were to qualify, and if that economic development were to happen and it were to qualify, then it would be up to the council whether to do that or not. If it were to be a new TIF, then we could use TIF bonds for that, and thus alleviating the need for motor fuel tax to be spent. And I know where the mayor's going to go with that, so I don't want to steal his thunder. But it would alleviate the pressure on the motor fuel tax fund. One other quick point of note in option 1, for the motor fuel tax, there is part of that new roads, you might notice there's an S there, one of the new roads would not touch the TIF at all, the existing TIF at all, and therefore would not benefit it, and so would not be eligible for any portion of TIF funding. So that would be 100% funding by the city. That cost is about $1 million. And so that would not be eligible for any cost share whatsoever under the current scenario. So I guess, there's really three options. There's cash, which, based on previous meetings, has largely been ruled out, because it would take, what do I say here? About 6 years, 7 years to build everything out, 8 years to build everything out. And then there's option one, which is to go at it as currently constructed. And then option two would be to do the investigation of a TIF, and if it were to qualify, see if we wanted to go that route. So the numbers are the same between option one and option two. It's just whether or not we're gonna obligate and tie up motor fuel tax monies, or look to do a new TIF and then pledge that money to it.
What is the time frame of doing a new TIF? Option two.
Give or take 6 months. Yeah, give or take 6 months, which, depending on when we were to start it, we're running into the holidays, so maybe 7 with the holidays, but about 6 months, give or take.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So with the new TIF, number one, has to pass the criteria before it's even eligible, correct? So we don't know that. That's why we would have to do the TIF study.
Go ahead.
So if we go option one and we use motor fuel tax and we come up with the $5.5 million, that means we pretty much get rid of motor fuel tax for about 15 years. We're at about 300,000 a year, or is it 400,000? Go ahead. Oh, wait, sorry.
Go ahead,
Tony.
go ahead.
No, you're in charge.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So go back to your first question. Correct, it would have to meet the criteria to become eligible. SB Friedman's done a cursory look, and they didn't say no. So,
Right, okay.
So, basically, if they looked at it and, if we wanted the TIF, a brand new building, they'd be like, if we wanted to do like Nippon, well, there's no
That's a
way that's
no.
gonna qualify. So, yes, they didn't say no, and obviously they can't say yes until they've done everything, but they didn't rule it out, so it's possible. And yeah, currently, the motor fuel tax budget's about 400,000 in revenue. We're spending a little over 200,000, and the debt service on that is about 150,000, and that would go up to about 2038.
So after expenses and the motor fuel tax, sounds like we're only at about 250,000 net?
A little bit less than that, but right around 200,000.
So I'm incorrect at 15. I was estimating 300,000. So it'd be more like for 20 years, we would strap the city for 20 years on motor fuel tax. Correct? Let's call it 18. Let's be
Yeah,
generous.
so it's about 17. But,
Okay, 17.
And I don't know, maybe Mr. Maselli could shed a little more light. We kind of targeted $150,000 in debt service, because that's kind of what we felt comfortable with looking at the budget. But I believe that number could go up or down a little bit. Is that,
Right,
Go ahead, sir.
yeah, thank you. That's exactly right. The target was 150,000 for that run. So
A year?
A year, exactly. Which means the thing that floated there was the term length. So if rates were lower, you can amortize that faster. It doesn't go out the full 17 years. If rates go higher, by the time you issue, you may have to go out another year to make sure you don't go over the $150,000 a year.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So for 17 years, we've now buckled down, strapped the city on motor fuel, no more use for that, correct? Okay, so I've been going through some of the numbers and the math, right? So the first building was 30 homes. I heard taxes over there were somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 in real estate taxes. So let's say, call it 6,000 average. 30 homes is 180,000, call it $200,000. The new building is gonna generate in real estate taxes about 450 to 500,000, which means all taxing bodies inherit, well, the city's gonna get about 40,000 of that, because we collect nothing right now. But now that they're annexed in, we collect 40, so let's make it all the other taxing bodies at 225,000, 25,000 generous, right? It's probably more, but it's a pretty nice jump for all those other taxing bodies. And if we went with option 2, so I did some math, just based on the numbers off the Nippon building, right? I know I asked you, Brad, but you didn't have them. And I guess eventually. So you can almost pay this TIF off in about 7 years if the TIF if it's even eligible, number one. And pay it off, and the TIF is over and done, because there's nothing else to do in that section. You built the roads, you put in the lights, you put in the storm sewers, the water mains. I mean, we put in that street next to Nippon, we paid, I think, 1.34 million. Okay, so and that came out of, some of it came out of the TIF money, I believe, or some of it, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, part of it, it was the same roughly 75, 25 split. Some of it, so the lion's share of it came out of TIF 1, the Thorndale TIF.
Correct.
The
Okay.
other portion was I believe it was technically in the agreement termed a refunding of building permit fees.
Okay. So technically, all taxing bodies had skin in the game from that TIF, that built that road, and they're all going to benefit from the Nippon building. And providing this next section goes through, which we hear it's going through, because I get a lot of emails complaining to me that they don't want to sell their homes, and I tell them, then don't sell your home. The city has nothing to do with it. But, you know, when the price is right, I guess the price is right. I can't control what their neighbors are doing. So, but are my numbers kind of right, 7 years if it's eligible for a TIF? Or no? You guys maybe didn't even look that far. I know I talked to you a couple days ago, so you probably didn't have a chance to look at it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, correct. We didn't get too far into the weeds on that, but if the numbers hold based upon the Nippon building, I mean, I guess the short answer is it would certainly, if we're only looking at 5.5 million, would certainly get paid off in less than the 23 years that we statutorily have to do anything with the TIF. And then if it's paid off, if we pay off the bonds sooner, either through a refunding or just put in a pot of money and legally defease them, then you have 3 options. 1, you can leave it open and see what else happens. 2, you can leave it open and then disperse the money to the other taxing bodies on a formula basis. I guess there's 4 options. Since it would be adjacent to the Thorndale TIF, they are technically eligible, at least as of today, still to share money back and forth. So if there was a bigger project, it could assist with that. And then number 4 is you close it down, and then everybody's EAV goes up commensurate to the value of those buildings.
Mayor, go ahead.
But with the TIF money, what do you mean share? We're not going to share with any other section. It's for that specific area. You can't move it anywhere else. But you can also sunset the thing, right? And just, all we want is just roads, lights, water mains, sewers, and we're done. There's nothing, once you put in the roads and stuff, what else do we need the TIF money for? We don't need it. Okay, I'm done.
Go ahead.
I was saying, I would be unaware of what else you would need to do, because everything else would be brand new in there, but just saying in theory. But I would tend to agree that if everything is built brand new, then there wouldn't be any need for any additional funding.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to move forward with option 2.
2. I'll second that.
To see if it will qualify. Then we can decide from there.
So we have a motion, a second. Any more questions on the, if there's no more questions, roll call, please? Or all in favor, because it's not a money. I'm sorry, go ahead.
2 roll call.
Do roll call. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page, though. So the Public Works and the property acquisition, that 15.5 million, which is line item 1 in both options. As you all know, the Public Works building is being, designed here in short order. The construction probably was starting later this year, early next year. So that would be an issuance that we would need to begin prepping for sale pretty soon. So everybody, I just want to make sure that everybody's,
Talking about bonds.
the bonds, correct, yeah. I'm just making sure that everybody's, eyes wide open, that everybody's aware of that and okay with us proceeding forward with that part of it today. And then we do the TIF investigation, and then in December, January, depending on how that turns out, that's really what's gonna drive which part of the road and signalization that we move forward with.
Yes, that's my understanding. That was,
Okay. Just didn't want there to be any surprises.
but thank you for clarity.
Any other questions? If not, can we have roll call on that, please?
Alderman Ames.
Yes.
Alderman Catalano.
Yes.
Alderman Curiel.
Yes.
Alderman Jacob.
Yes.
Alderman Messina.
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Items to consider at future meetings, if there are none, if anybody has any items. If not, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Say
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Good night, all.